Welcome to the Department Chair Leadership Podcast, where the goal is to improve organizations and serve students one leader at a time. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Jochum. If you're a department chair in higher education or any type of educational leader, and you want to improve yourself to better serve and influence those you lead, you've come to the right place. Because the best way to improve an organization is to improve its leader. Let's get started. Welcome back to the Department Chair Leadership Podcast. As always, really appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to invest in yourself and those you serve by developing your leadership skills. Today, what I'm going to talk about might not take up a lot of time, but I hope it requires a lot of thought, reflection, and application because it's foundational to who you are as a leader. And almost everything you and your organization do and accomplish, the way you not only make people feel, but what you enable them to do and become, rests on what I'm going to talk about, and that's your core values. Now, to hopefully help out a little more, and probably just because of the way my mind works, I have come up with an acronym for C.O.R.E, C-O-R-E, that will hopefully help us understand and really get into why every organization, no matter what your leadership title is, higher education, outside of higher education, we have to focus on our core values. Yes, these can relate and they should be combined, woven into our strategic plan, our mission statement, vision, all of those things. But I like to really focus on this first because this really affects how we interact on a daily basis, how we treat each other, the decisions we make. So let's get started here. Again, core values based upon C-O-R-E. So the first core value, or the first description I want to share with you for C, stands for culture and climate. Now, we've talked about this before. We've had guests on that talk about this. And I will say up front, a lot of times we might just say the word culture, and I'm pretty sure that everything that we talk about will include climate, but I think it's important for us to acknowledge that culture also includes climate. I also like to share with people, and some of you might be familiar with this, my background is in foreign language, English as a second language, and we would talk about big C and little c culture, and I like to share that when I teach on this because it is another way to kind of paint the picture. For example, when we talk about big C culture, when we are looking at other countries, the languages they speak, their customs, those things, big C culture is what, I don't want to say stereotypically, but to some extent it's what everyone probably knows. So if you were to look at a map of a part of the world or a country, you would be accurate to say in general, people in that area, that region, that country, they speak this language. They tend to eat this food. They tend to celebrate these holidays. Okay. That's what we call big C culture. Little c culture is what real people living real lives do on a day-to-day basis. For example, many years ago, probably more than I'd like to admit now, I studied abroad. I went to Mexico. I thought that would be a pretty good idea if I really wanted to become fluent in Spanish. Obviously, it was transformational to me. But what I'm getting at here is I understood from a big C culture perspective, by and large, okay, what people did there, language they spoke, the food, etc. But it wasn't until I went there on a day-to-day basis, not only from a linguistic standpoint, a relational standpoint, a culture standpoint, all of those things, that I truly understood what it was that real people living real normal lives every day, how they behaved, what they valued, how they went about expressing those, and from my perspective, how that was really, really tied to the language and how and when things were said and all of that. So from a leadership perspective, here's what culture is, okay? Culture can simply be thought of as what we do. Now, all of our organizations, what we do, I don't know that some of it we have a choice. For example, in higher education, we educate students and we hopefully help them graduate. They get a degree and then they go on and either pursue a profession, go on for more schooling. But if you were to look at least in the United States, and I suspect in other countries, if you were to look at the culture of higher education and then even drill down into specific departments, certainly whatever department, if you are in higher education, that you chair, a lot of our culture is the same. Some people, when they teach this, they say it's our traditions. We certainly have a lot of traditions, be it how we teach classes, how grades are given, how we confer degrees. And we need those, especially if you live in a world like I do, where we have to answer to national and state level accreditors. So a lot of our culture is dictated to us, and that's okay. It's fine. But then, if we want to look a little further, we talk about the climate. So what's the climate like? So you could take, I chair a teacher education department. You could take teacher education across the entire country at every university. And I promise you that a lot of what we do, at least on a surface level, at least what people see from somewhat of a distance, has to be the same. Because by and large, what we do is we prepare people to go into public schools and teach. However, if you look into each department, if there are hundreds of departments that do the same thing, you might find 100 different ways of capturing the climate. So climate is, just like I found years ago when I went to Mexico, what do people really do and value on a day-to-day basis? What are their actions? What are their behaviors? So as leaders, I just want you to think about, and the big takeaway from today's episode is just give you some food for thought. You have to have your core values. And the first thing that you need to recognize when you're thinking about those, either on your own or corporately with maybe your inner circle of leaders and then the rest of your unit, is yes, this is what we do, but why do we do it? And how are our actions? How are our actions in line or not with what we say we value? Another thing when we talk about climate and what we really value on a day-to-day basis is let's look at the things that we typically recognize. And I think some things we have to recognize, but recognition is not always handing somebody a plaque or a formalized award. Recognition is simply telling somebody, hey, I see you. Good job. I appreciate that. What do we recognize? Now, hopefully you're recognizing something, but if you really want to understand the climate of your culture or the climate of your organization, look at the things that we're recognizing. Because I always say, when it comes to looking at culture and climate, we encourage what we tolerate, and then we normalize what we ignore. So maybe just think of the things that you're recognizing. So C for core is culture and climate. O stands for ownership. It's very important to look at what each person in the organization thinks they own or not, and what we need to take ownership in to truly fall in line with our values. Going back to anything I'm going to share, but I'll just say this now. Anytime you want to do a cultural audit, just step back and instead of putting the pressure on yourself saying, ooh, we want to aspire to this, what should we do? Just step back and say, if our goal, play devil's advocate, if our goal were to be a terribly engaged culture climate, to not have ownership, to not have all the things I'm going to talk about here in the rest of this podcast, what would we do? And then look at what you want to do and fill in the gaps. It'll give you an opportunity to maybe stand a little bit away from it. I've condensed that quite a bit, but when I have done trainings on this, which could be a an entire workshop. As always, if you're interested in having me work with you or your organization, I'd be happy to do so. But nonetheless, I found that playing that devil's advocate really helps. But ownership. O for core is ownership. What do people really take ownership of? And I've often said sometimes people with the best of intentions have been empowered beyond their job description and they want to own something they shouldn't. And then there's others that need to own something. But what do we do on a daily basis that shows we have some level of buy-in to the organization? Now, another way to look at ownership is how empowered do people feel to make decisions? Now, you're the leader. You're not giving up or taking it easy by saying you make all the decisions. No, and it's not a sign of weakness to empower others to make those. But how I always like to talk about this is how far can we drill down? So there are things that the front office staff should be empowered to make decisions on. They should be able to tell people, yes, we can do that. No, that isn't going to work. There are people in the organization, be it teachers, professors, whatever your organization is. They should, to some reasonable level, have enough ownership that they can say, yes, we can do that. No, we can't. What you don't want is when people, even if they want to have ownership, feel scared and they haven't been empowered to where, boy, if it's really toxic, they don't want to make any decisions or comment on anything because they really have not been empowered to have a reasonable level of ownership. So your core values should focus on the culture and climate you want. It should recognize the extent to which people are reasonably empowered to take ownership. R for core stands for relationships. Relationships, if you've listened to any episode prior to this, you know those are huge. We have to have solid relationships when we lead an organization. But two words I want to leave you with in this context. How do we talk about others, to others, and about ourselves, our organization, and how do we treat others? Essentially, how do we use words? Because a lot of the relationship building that we have to do, personally and professionally, but certainly professionally, is based upon words and how we talk about ourselves, our organization, how we talk about each other, especially in the absence of those people, and then how we treat people. If we say we value being collaborative colleagues, if we say we value a culture and a climate where people are valued, seen, and heard, if we say that we want to take ownership and feel proud that people show up and do their job and feel like they're part of a professional family, then we probably shouldn't be using words to hurt people. We probably shouldn't be doing things that might be perceived as bullying behavior, which unfortunately I think happens probably more than we want to admit in a lot of the professional world. So for today's purposes, when we talk about relationships within the framework of establishing your core values, I just want you to think about how you talk to others, about your organization. We have many stakeholders, no matter what your area is. We serve others. And how do you treat people? It's going to give you a great insight into the real level of relationships that you have. E, the last letter of core. To review, we have C, culture, climate, O, ownership, R, relationships. E stands for empathy. Now, here's a definition, a dictionary definition of empathy, and it says, the action of understanding, being aware of, being sensitive to, and vicariously experiencing the feelings, thoughts, and experience of another. Another way to look at this as leaders, to me, this really, really underscores the importance of emotional intelligence, which can best be described and captured by the common saying of people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So empathy, when we're looking at our core values, why is empathy important? Well, first of all, it kind of ties everything else together because nobody is perfect. I've said this, part of my leadership credo is, as a leader, I'll never have a perfect group of people, and they will never have a perfect leader. That means me, that means you. And so that empathy part is being human, being understanding that people with the best of intentions are going to make mistakes. And so we need to look at, are we being empathetic? Are we holding people to not only an unhealthy but an unattainable standard? Are we expecting, or do we think it's great leadership and defines a healthy culture and climate when we demand perfection and 100% on everything? I'll just let you know, it doesn't. We're fooling ourselves. So empathy, to what extent are we being empathetic and understanding of each other? Which also, I've said many times, a leader's superpower is vulnerability, and that's also, I think they go hand in hand. So if we look at, if you're thinking as a leader and you want to do this just as a thought exercise or want to turn it into something more where you talk to your leadership team and then the entire unit, what are our core values? Because when life gets hard and we have to make tough decisions, decision by decision, are we making I should say, let me back up, are our decisions in line with our core values? So again, core, in my world, the way I teach this, C stands for culture climate. Have we developed a healthy culture and climate based upon what we do, what we value, what we recognize, and what we reward? O, ownership. To what extent have people been reasonably and healthy, I don't know if that's a word, but I'll make it up. It's my podcast. To what extent have people been empowered to have realistic ownership of the organization and their own role? Doesn't mean that you pass the buck and make them make all the hard decisions. That's your job as leader. But they need to have that, what Daniel Pink says is that healthy balance of mastery, purpose, and autonomy. That's O for ownership. R is relationships. How do we individually and collectively talk about others and treat others when they're in our presence, and more importantly, when they're out of our presence? Another way that I'll just add to that is, how do we talk and treat leaders? How do you talk and treat about people when your leaders aren't around, or if you don't think your leaders will find out? I'll just leave that there and let you think about that. And then finally, empathy. Are we being sensitive to other people? Are we trying to really understand their experience, where they're coming from, why they're thinking a certain way, why they're feeling a certain way? Because that is really going to weave through all the other aspects. So now let's back up here. We've talked about your core values, and there are many ways you can go about finding these. But I'm just going to give you a little insight into organizations that I've either been in or currently am in, and give you kind of a 30,000-foot view here. So let's say, as an organization, our core values are the following: honesty, integrity, accountability, gratitude, and grace. So if we step back, what does that say about our culture and climate, about what we value and what we do? Well, it says that we value people telling the truth, doing so with a certain level of integrity, being accountable. Doesn't mean that people get in trouble, but to me, accountability just says, do your job. Gratitude is, I think sometimes no matter what we do, we can get so into the weeds that we forget to step back and say, you know what, it might be a hard day, the job might be hard, but hey, I'm still very thankful. And then grace, that's just another way of having that empathy, of giving people space to be human. Ownership, if we have that honesty, integrity, accountability, gratitude, and grace, that's going to empower people to take some ownership of what we do and the organization. Relationships, listen, if you want to give people space and create an environment where we can be accountable, be honest, show gratitude, show grace, we have to be mindful of how we talk and treat about others, how we use our words. And then finally, empathy, I think it ties through there. We have to be empathetic. We have to understand where people are coming from to promote and make our decisions on core values centered, again, on honesty, integrity, accountability, gratitude, and grace. So overall, again, friends, my goal, this is a very, very important topic. I'm not saying I'm an expert by any means. You can certainly find entire books on this, other great podcasts. And my goal wasn't to dig too deep. My goal was just to give you a takeaway, when I say takeaway, use on Monday type of strategy, in that The acronym that I use for core values for CORE is C.O.R.E, culture, climate, ownership, relationships, and empathy. And if you do nothing else, just take some time to reflect on the extent to which your actions, the things you say, do, the things that other people in your organization say and do, how that reflects your core values. And I bet a lot of it's going to be in line, but we're human. You're going to maybe find some areas where, maybe if we just focused a little differently on that area, how we behave, maybe start to recognize this thing a little more and that thing a little less, or I don't know, vice versa. I think you're going to find that it will help you and your organization. Hey, as always, I'm always more than willing to come alongside you and help you individually, help your organization to really focus and develop your core values, because everyone will benefit from this. So as always, thank you so much for taking time to develop yourself as a leader, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to the Department Chair Leadership Podcast. If you want to learn more about my leadership philosophy and how to be an effective chair, please consider my book, The Department Chair, A Practical Guide to Effective Leadership. You can find this and learn more about me by going to cjleadership.com. Also, please be sure to like this podcast, leave a review, and share with your colleagues. Thanks again for improving your organization and those you serve by improving yourself. Take care.